All right, so in chapter 4, you're going to be focusing on collecting, displaying, and analyzing data. And the first thing that we want to start with is looking at the different types of samples and how surveys could potentially be biased based off of how the sample was collected. You are going to see data everywhere. You see data whenever you're looking at commercials. You may see it on billboards. Down the road as a company, you may be in charge of producing that data. And you have to remember that data is typically produced with a motive, right? If you're in charge of your company's data, you want to put out something that's going to make your company look better and that's going to encourage people to buy it. So you need to remember that anytime you look at something, I want you to think about how the sample was taken and if it could be biased. And I have an example for you to think about. So do you prefer Wendy's or McDonald's French fries? Let's say you wanted to do a survey on who has the best fries. Or maybe you saw this bar graph in a magazine or on a billboard on who has better fries. From that bar graph, when you first look, you may think, okay, Wendy's has the best fries. That's what the population is saying, that's the results. But you really need to think about, well, do I know enough about how they collected this information? Maybe the survey had a picture of these two fries on it. And, and maybe Burger King too, but I'm just focused on the McDonald's versus Wendy's. Wendy's clearly looks better, but you don't really know how this information was collected. Or maybe where they collected it. Were they standing outside of a Wendy's when they collected this? Did they give you a free Wendy's certificate for fries when you answered your survey? Were they standing outside of a McDonald's? Were they on a neutral playing field? Also think about this. A lot of times you see those commercials maybe where they show a person holding a billboard with a sock and it says which sock is whiter and they're advertising for Tide. The pictures that are displayed with it are going to affect your results. If I show you these Wendy's fries, me personally, I think they look a lot more attractive than these Wendy's fries. There's grease stains, they're not as stacked as pretty. So maybe if you presented the information with these two pictures, you don't know, maybe you would get a different result. Maybe in this case, McDonald's would have a bigger hit. So think about that. Know that how the information is collected is really important to know if there's any bias going on. If you saw this bar graph standing alone, you do not have enough information to know, okay, where did they collect this? Was it on equal playing fields? Did they ask all of the same type of people or the same age of people, or did they get a good mix of everybody? A good sampling method is going to be something that's random and that gets people from all different types of groups. So here's your definitions to go into chapter 4. The population is going to be the entire group that's being studied. Basically, it's who do we want to know about? Who are we talking about in general? If I wanted to do a study about all Fort Couch students, then that would be my population. But if I want to do a study about all Upper St. Clair citizens, my population would change and my sample should change with that. The sample are the part of the population that is actually being surveyed. So who actually gets asked? If you're doing a sample about Fort Couch students, then who do I actually ask? Do I ask maybe all of my friends? That could be my sample. Or maybe I go and I ask one student from each homeroom. That could be my sample. But it's only the ones who actually are participating in the survey. This population actually includes everybody who has a chance to participate. And then a bias is going to be a survey in which the population is not well represented, which means usually maybe it's only representative of part of the population. Like I said, if this survey was done outside of Wendy's, more Wendy's customers are going to be answering this because they're coming out of Wendy's. That could be a bias for this survey. So we want to identify the population, the sample, and any potential bias in the example 1 below. A Best Buy cashier asks customers who make a purchase how many hours a day they use electronic devices. You have to identify 3 things. What is the population? What is the sample? And is there any potential bias that could be happening in this statement? So the Best Buy cashier asks customers who make a purchase how many hours a day they use electronics. Who is everybody that has a chance of being asked? Well, I would say the population would be all Best Buy visitors. I'm not even going to say customers, because if they walk in the store, they kind of have a chance of getting asked. So anybody who walks into Best Buy is part of the population. Who is the sample then? Well, the sample is going to be the people that the cashier asks, which means the customers who actually make a purchase. The sample then is the people at Best Buy who make a purchase. So how could this be biased? Do you think of any potential bias that could be happening here in the statement? Well, Best Buy is an electronics store, right? So the people who are making electronic purchases, do you think that they would be more likely to use electronic devices for a longer period of time? Probably. So here, the potential bias is the people making the purchases probably spend more time on electronics than others. The people asked purchase electronics and therefore probably spend more time on them. A good sample would try to get a good variety. Maybe you would do it standing in the middle of the mall or standing outside of a school and asking every few people or asking people of all different ages. Chances are my grandma, she's not going to be often making a purchase at Best Buy, and she also does not spend many hours on electronic devices. But my dad, he is a huge electronic guy, so he would probably he's at Best Buy all the time, and if he were to answer how many hours he spends, it would be way more than my grandma. That could definitely be a bias here. Let's try B. The 8th grade student council president polls their classmates about the Valentine's Day social. So who's the population, everybody who has a chance of being asked? Who's the sample who actually gets asked? And is there any chance of a bias here? The population is going to be all the students, I think, at that school, right? An 8th grade student council president polls the classmates about the Valentine's Day social. Since this is open to all students, I'm thinking that the population, everybody who we're talking about, is going to be all the students at that school. The sample then is who actually gets asked. So an 8th grade student council president polls her classmates. It's going to be the 8th grade president's classmates. In this case, if I'm talking about in general all students at the school, is there maybe a bias that's existing here? Well, for our school, our building is a 7th and 8th grade building. If you only pull 8th graders, is that fair or is that maybe a little bit biased? It's definitely biased. You would want to have students from both grades and also students from all the different classes maybe. This student council president is polling only their classmates, so students in other grades or classes do not have an equal chance of being polled. So students in other grades or classes do not have an equal chance of being polled. Also think about this. If the student council president came up to you and said, how'd you like the social? Chances are you might feel a little cautious on how you answer that question because the student council is the one who puts on the social. So it would be more fair to send out maybe like a ballot in all homerooms, everybody completes one, and it's not being given to you by the student council president. You can feel a little bit more comfortable answering honestly if you didn't like it, and not feeling like you have to say something good about it if you truly didn't like it just because the person who's asking you. So I would say that the sample here is not representative of the whole population, and also that you may feel some pressure based off of how she's asking you, he or she is asking you. The last one then, a news reporter asked people in the downtown Pittsburgh if they would support adding to the T or the subway system. So who am I talking about in general? Sounds to me like I'm talking about all of the people or the citizens of Pittsburgh. Well, the news reporter, who do they actually ask for the sample? The sample says that they ask people downtown if they support adding to the T. So they ask the people, it's just the people, the reporter asks. And it's downtown. Is this representative of the whole population, or is there maybe some room for some bias? Let's think about this. The people who are downtown either live down there or they work down there. Chances are, do you think that they would be more or less supportive of adding to the T? I definitely think more supportive. So there is a bias. The people downtown will probably be more supportive because they're down there. They need to get around. That could be a bias in this result. Now, that's not saying that this is wrong, right? If you were a news reporter and you wanted to promote adding to the T, you might do this so that the more results you have support your cause and what you're trying to get. But it is a biased representation, and you, as a student, as the reader, as the learner in this world that you're in, need to investigate that and always be thinking about how the information could be biased. Now, the good way to do a sampling would be a random way, and all of these are good, typically unbiased ways. So random means it's just completely by chance. Maybe you take everybody's name, you put them in a hat, and you pull 5 out. Everybody has an equal chance, and it's completely random. Systematic would be according to a rule or a formula. Maybe you say every person with the first name starting with an A. Or maybe you say every 10th person who enters the school. But you pick a rule and you stick to it. You only ask those. And then the third way that's good is stratified. And this means that it's at random, but it's from randomly chosen subgroups. So maybe if you wanted to get feedback on the Valentine's Day social here at Fort Couch, you might go to each homeroom and randomly select one student from each homeroom. Or break it up into 7th grade and 8th grade and then randomly select 10 7th grade students and 10 8th grade students. But you break it up into groups. So read over example 2. You can try this first on your own if you want to pause. Write down which type of sampling method you think is shown here, and then you can go over it with me. In a county survey, the Democratic Party's members whose names begin with the letter D are chosen. The names who begin with the letter D, that is systematic. It's a rule that they are following. For B, a telephone company randomly chooses customers to survey about its service. This would be random, so you're looking for that word in there. Everybody had an equal chance and they pulled it randomly. And the third one, a high school randomly chooses 3 classes from each grade, then draws 3 random names. We're breaking it up into groups, so it is stratified. The last example here of the challenge, I want you to give one of those sampling names to each one of these. You can pause and try this, and then press play to go over it. All right, so this first one is random. The second one is systematic. And the third one is stratified. It looks like they broke it up into groups and then picked a couple from each one. You're ready to go on to your quick check.